Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge, or in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people.
Which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you. And we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Well, hello and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. I'm here today sharing with you the third in the series that I'm calling the real, raw, and relatable behind the scenes of our surgery and recovery. This episode is focused on the recovery phase. So if you haven't listened to the first 2 of the series, you don't have to listen to these in order, but it might make a little bit more sense. So go ahead and go back to listen to the last 2 weeks of episodes, and then come back here and listen to this one. And if you are new here, or if you have heard the last 2 episodes and haven't taken action yet, I want to make sure I let you know that I am opening up a community group based around this podcast. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it today because I've talked about the last 2 weeks. But what I want you to know is, firstly, it's open as of February 1st. So I believe that it's going to be open at the time of this recording of this episode. And what this group is it's going to be a place for us to actually gather, if you will. It's going to be a place where I can come on and do live coaching, where I can do opportunities to interact and to be in community with each other. So one of the things I hear most from special needs moms is I feel so alone and I feel like nobody gets it. And so that's why I created this podcast, and that's why I'm creating this community. It's free. It's fun. It's easy. I came up with that last week. And I thought that was a great way of describing it. And so what you need to do is just go ahead and click on the show notes of this episode. You will find easy instructions. Sign up. It's going to be on a really easy to use platform called Circle, where it's a little different than Facebook. And in my opinion, has a lot of perks. And so I cannot wait to see you there. If you have any special requests, come bring them to the group and let's hear them. With that said, let's get into this week's episode. We're talking about recovery, and specifically my recovery, not my child's recovery. So that's two very, very separate things. However, obviously they map pretty well together. Early on, when we learned about my son's surgery, we were told that it was going to be a 2 to 3 month recovery time. So our first surgery date was the 14th of October. It got pushed back to the 21st of October. But what that did is it aligned the surgery and hospitalization with like most intense holiday season, like portion of the year. We had Halloween. We were actually in the hospital for Halloween. And side note, that did not go well for him. Thanksgiving, and then right into Christmas and New Year's. And so I don't know that I could do much to change that. And so what this did is it made recovery be something that was happening on top of all else that was going on in our lives. Now, I think this is a phenomenon that actually is always happening for us as special needs moms. It's not like we get to go, whatever the current challenge that you're facing with your child is, it's not like you can go have that challenge and then go on a 2-week recovery retreat. And so all the time when we as moms are doing what I'm calling recovery, we're doing it on top of our regular lives. And so I want you to kind of just think about, wow, what does that mean? What does that mean for me? What does that mean I might have to do differently than I'm doing now to actually give myself the space to recover? And honestly, I'm still in this phase. So I feel very much on the other side of recovery in the sense of like I feel very different than I did in the early days of recovery. However, I think it's an evolving process. And I don't know that there's a clean, I wish there was, start and beginning date. So I'm going to go through kind of just sharing like what I noticed, what I did to support myself, fears that came up, kind of what came up for me along the way, kind of just sharing my story because I think you're going to relate to it. And I know that you're going to pull some value for it for yourself of what you might maybe want to incorporate in your life now, or what you might want to kind of keep tucked away as something to have in the future when you need it. Kind of a toolbox, if you will. So early in recovery. So this is kind of right when we were maybe coming out of the hospital, kind of when we made it through the time where we thought, okay, like I think we made it through that like first intense season. I was not okay. And I knew I was not okay. But interestingly enough, I was more upset about not being okay than I was like in just not being okay. Does that make sense? And so it's like I knew that I wasn't myself, but I was very worried about not being myself. I think I had a lot of fear about like never being myself again. And it was like I knew again cognitively that it was very like expected for me to not feel like I did before, or like I knew I was numb in some cases, but it was almost like that being numb state for me was itself very unsettling because for me, my most valued way of being is connected. And so in the survival process, or what I'm going to call like the survival response, which actually I'm going to share a PDF as part of the show notes because it talks about like, so it's called the polyvagus nerve chart, I think is what it's called. And it's just like this little bell chart that shows what happens to us with a stress trigger. And it, I think most of you have probably heard the fight, flight, and freeze process. And this chart is valuable because it actually shows the bell curve. It's like not like you go through the experience of being very escalated and then just like jump to the other side. You actually have to come down the other side. And so when I'm talking about recovery, I'm talking about coming out of the freeze and kind of shifting back into the flight or freeze. And it's not a smooth process. It is a bumpy road. And I didn't like that. I still don't like it because for me, I felt lost. I felt like I couldn't connect the things that I knew usually made me happy. And probably there was some slight depression happening. I talked about this with my therapist. I noticed, hey, wait a second. I don't actually desire to do much of anything. And that was unusual for me. And then it scared me that I didn't desire it. So it's maybe it's a little bit of judgment on top of the actual feeling. And so just to kind of go back and summarize, the things that I was really afraid of in this early recovery was I'm never going to go back to how I was before. I won't ever be happy again. And it's interesting for me to even look back at this because it's not like I was if we look at a scale of 1 to 10 on happiness, I wasn't at a 1. I wasn't extremely unhappy. I just wasn't as happy as I was before. I felt like I had lost all that I had gained. And that to me felt very scary. So there was this doubt that I would kind of ever get back there. And I want to point out here that in these moments when we're in this recovery, it's almost like we're having to rediscover what we already know. It's almost, for me, now that I'm even kind of processing it now, it's almost like I had to go one step deeper on something I had already learned, but it had gotten scrambled's the word I'm looking for. And so it's this recovery process is almost like an unscrambling. It's putting all the letters back in place again in a way that they made sense again, in the way that I could read them again. And I recognize now it's a very normal and natural process. It's nothing to be scared of, but I'm also human. So I was scared. So other things that I noticed that I wanted to share was, again, this desire not to do anything. I was I don't want to do anything because it looks like more work and I don't want any more work. And this was everything. My husband's hey, let's go to the snow. I was no. Hey, let's go. No. And that was my initial response. I sometimes could get over that and recognize, okay, I'll give that a go. Or this might be a situation where I'm willing to do that. What it does is it goes to show that my reserves were so depleted. I just didn't have anything to give. And so my response is just really kind of shutting it all down. I also noticed I felt a complete lack of grounding. I just couldn't get my feet on the ground again. And again, I really don't like that feeling. To me, that then starts to make me feel a little bit panicky and something's wrong. I'm not okay. I don't feel safe. Then a lack of connection to self and others. So I think part of this freeze response is amazing because it allows us to navigate feelings that are too big at the time to process or too threatening. I'm going to say that. And so that's wonderful because it allowed me to get through the hospitalization, which was full of very scary moments. And the kind of dark side of that is that it also isolates me from, for me, the things that make me feel connected to myself, right? So if I'm numb and not feeling things, then I'm also not feeling this connection that I love. And this is connection to myself and to others. So that's something that I noticed. I also noticed that I was I have zero inspiration for kind of anything. And this felt scary because I was okay, so I run a podcast and I have a business that requires me to be creative. And so this feels like it could be a problem. Again, in the moment when we were experiencing this, we don't have the gift of hindsight to be able to be oh, that's how I felt then and this is how I feel now. In the moment, it feels real and it feels like it doesn't necessarily have an end. That's what happens for us. We feel like it's never ending. And then that feels bad, it feels hopeless, it feels scary. So I was definitely not liking the way that I was used to having a lot of inspiration and ideas and just things that would like my mind would think about. And I didn't have any of that. I was basically thinking about like, okay, like what am I going to eat, sleep? Like it was just the thoughts were more survival based versus like kind of prefrontal cortex, which is like the part of your brain that like thinks these higher thoughts. That part of my brain was just like, no, we're not ready, but thanks. That I did not like. Okay. So that's what I noticed in this recovery time. So we're past the hospital. We're kind of like basically rebuilding our lives. Now, I want to share with you this very long list, actually, of what I did to support myself. Like this is almost where like my warrior mom came in, as far as like I will be non-stopping in giving myself what I need to be able to kind of recover myself so that I then can lead the family and obviously my business, but that obviously it's the experience that I want to have in life. And so first thing I did was I declared a time period in which I was going to kind of say business is not as usual. And at the time, I think it was maybe like early November when I had this conversation. I actually don't remember that, but I had said, okay, I'm going to look ahead. I mean, basically nothing's normal because we're going into holiday season. And regardless if you've just had surgery, that's a hard time as a special needs mom, just to have like all of our routines totally disrupted all the time. And so I said, okay, January 4th, my kids are going back to school on January 4th. I will declare that my life is not going to be as usual until January 4th. So this is almost like, I think I've talked about this before, in the state of California, and I think most states, when the governor or whoever declares a state of emergency, it then enacts or enables certain like protocols to take place. Different funding, different laws can be manipulated. And so during this time, it's almost like we declare, it's like this is the state of emergency. And so for me in my life, what that meant was, okay, when I am declaring a business not as usual time, it means my work life is going to look different. The things that I ask myself to do and don't do are going to look different. All the things, right? Like even me receiving additional support in terms of meals, all of that's going to look different. So I kind of gave myself a time period. And what's funny about this actually is I kind of forgot about this actually. I declared it early on, and then I think I like got less connected to like that end period. But here's what's really interesting is that as I was preparing for this episode, I was kind of looking back at timeline and just looking at different journals and different notes I had. And I was like, well, guess what is the time that I was like, really like, I'm back. I feel me again. Guess what it was? January 4th. It was exactly the time period in which I had declared business not as usual. And I don't know, I thought that was pretty cool. And so all the things I'm going to share with you that went into this time period, I believe were able to kind of give me that result and get me to where I am today. I think I said it in last week's episode. I don't know that I'm completely done with this process. I would actually say I'm not done complete with this process. However, I have enough elevation and enough distance from it to be able to obviously share about it and to know that I'm going to, like, it's going to be a lifelong, for me, it's probably a lifelong process. So another thing I did to support myself is more therapy. Therapy was, again, just one of the things that was really supportive to me prior to, but definitely during recovery time. Coaching. So coaching and therapy are distinctly different. And I won't go too much to the details on that. But for me, coaching was the thing that allowed me to kind of look at creating what I wanted now that this was my new set of circumstances. So that was really, really helpful for me during this time. Also, coaching is where kind of I looked ahead and kind of started to reimagine what I wanted and really set a vision for my life. I also looked at all of the things that I was doing and really looked at all the different angles. So, hitting like mind, body, spirit, if you will. So my sister-in-law sent me a really great new devotional. It's called Becoming Beautiful Again. I do know that it's written by Lisa Turkist, And she sent it to me because this gal has been through a lot. And if you're a special needs mom that is Christian, I really recommend it, because I didn't really want the pretty story of like a Christian that was like, oh, God is so good. I wanted the story of like, this is not how I thought it was going to go. And this is how I found God. So that's really what this devotional is about. And so that was a spiritual connection that's been really helpful to me. So they're not going to be in order of all those areas, but you're going to see how like I'm doing mind, body, spirit, all of it. Okay. So next thing that has been really helpful is writing to heal. I regularly journaled prior to surgery. Just like I mentioned a little bit ago, I had not a lot of thoughts after surgery. I had like no thoughts. So I actually didn't journal. I didn't have anything to say, which is again, very unlike me, but I just let that be until I was like, okay, I'm ready now to start processing some of the trauma. And for me, I had this book that I gotten a long time ago called Writing to Heal. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to follow the book. I'm going to write through and look at these things in a way in which they have found that's very healing. And I'm going to write through them. And it has been very, very helpful. I've done that. Reiki is something that I did before actually and after the surgery. I actually just did it this weekend again. And she's a previous guest of this podcast. Her name is Robin Graygotsky, and I love her. And she does distant Reiki. And if you don't know what Reiki is, I'm not even going to try to explain it because I will make it sound super weird. But go back and listen to the episode if you're interested. And I will say that what I find it to be is just a very gentle healing modality for my spirit, my mind, and my body. I think it's a very valuable tool, and I definitely recommend it. Robin actually is available. So reach out to her and see if you might be interested as well. Acupuncture. So I also go to acupuncture. For me, it's a way of, again, really kind of supporting my body and also my spirit in the sense of like, for me, when I tend my body, it also tends my spirit. Now, when we're also looking at body, I also started going to a naturopath. Something that I have struggled with for years and years is headaches, specifically migraines, and it makes me so frustrated. And obviously, it can be pretty debilitating at times. And so part of my recovery was like, okay, I'm going to find a naturopath and I'm going to heal the inflammation in my physical body. You might get the idea that I believe that like that mind, body, and spirit is also connected. So the emotional impact of the trauma has a relationship to my body. And interestingly enough, this is really just like what my doctor that I met with last week really kind of validated that. She's like, yeah, like the way that your hormones are responding indicates adrenal fatigue. She's like, is it hard to wake up in the morning? I was like, heck yeah. And if you look at my hormone pattern, like it's not surprising. And if you look at that hormonal pattern with somebody that's been chronically stressed, is very consistent with somebody that's been stressed. So good news is there's support for that. And so I'm engaging with her to really support me from that physicality, like nutrient, like all the things, to support my body and inflammation. Okay. What else did I do to support myself? I rested. I just did a lot of nothing, or I did a lot of what I felt like in the moment. I didn't ask myself to do a lot. I didn't set the caliber very high at all. Like for Thanksgiving, my brother came and he got a house here, and I basically just asked myself to show up. I think we made some pies. We actually had a good time making pies, but I was like, okay, well, here's my options. I'm going to go buy a Thanksgiving meal or somebody else is going to make it. Do you see what I mean? I didn't ask myself to do a lot. And the pies for me, those were fun. Okay. So I rested. I did the bare minimum. I just allowed it all to be kind of okay. And I did a pretty good job of this. I didn't act out of obligation. So even when it comes to gifts, I was like, okay, I'm going to give the gifts that I have the capacity to choose. And if I don't feel like I have the capacity to do it, I will not do it. So that was kind of my stand and my way of being there. And just like I kind of mentioned earlier, I would like to have said that I did a lot of exercising, journaling, and healthy eating, because I do think those would be beneficial, but I didn't do any of that. I didn't start journaling and writing until pretty recently again, and I didn't start exercising until pretty recently again, and I definitely wasn't eating well. So it's just recently that I've come back on board with some of these things that we know are aligned with making people feel good. So also I allowed myself just to kind of organize and clean and like not, again, do a lot other than that. Another thing I did was to focus on relationships that felt safe and easy and restorative. So I really kind of surrounded myself with people that were helping me have conversations that led me towards kindness, towards compassion, and really could kind of hold the story that I had and not have to fix it, but allow me to kind of sort through and kind of like re-scramble or unscramble to be able to kind of have my bearing again. So I mentioned trauma a couple times, and there's a tool called shaking and dancing that I love. It's something that you definitely have to be willing to do something that feels kind of silly to do, but it's actually from a book called Transforming Trauma. And it's very, very effective at allowing your body to process some big emotions, some uncomfortable emotions, and specifically traumatic emotions. I'm not going to go into a lot of time here. If you're interested in it, I'll tell you all about it and I'll give you all the resources, but know that it's just one of the things that I did. Another thing that I did, reluctantly at first, I might add, is I went away for 2 nights with my husband. This was one of the hardest things for me to do. So I think my automatic was so just tied to staying with my kids, helping my kids, be there for my kids, that it was really hard for me to step away in this capacity, like for that length of time, to just be with my husband. Now, am I glad I did? 1,000,000%. Did I need it? 1,000,000,000%. No. But I think when we were planning it, I noticed, wow, I'm like, at first we were going to just do 1 night away. And interestingly enough, the place that we were staying only did 2 nights. Like it was a 2-night minimum. And I really wanted to stay at this one place. So it kind of forced me to be open to doing 2 nights. And I'm so glad that I did, because as you can see, I was like, 1 night's enough. 1 night's better than nothing. And I was just really reluctant to like step away. And you know, of course, looking back, I'm like, why was I so reluctant? That was amazing. But, you know, when you've been fighting to support your children for so long, sometimes you just get stuck in the patterns. You get stuck in these unquestioned thoughts. And that's very much what was happening for me here. I just didn't question, like, why would I not go away with my husband? We have the childcare, we have the resources. Like, why is this something that you are like avoiding? And so as soon as I realized like that I was really so resistant to it, it kind of opened up to like being willing to commit to it, recognizing that I knew that it would be good for us and good for me. Then I was willing to do it. And it was really, really restorative, like not just for obviously us as a couple and, you know, for our marriage relationship, but also for us individually to have like some time where we weren't required to tend to our children's need. Like we really could just have fun. We went to Temecula to this amazing little bed and breakfast, and we went wine tasting and we ate a lot of food, and it was fabulous. Like it was exactly what we needed. I was so clear that I needed to go somewhere that was quiet, that was kind of out in nature-ish. And for us, it's like 45 minutes from our house. So for me, it gave me the kind of security net that I needed to be able to leave our children, knowing that we could get back in a moment's notice if we needed to. Lastly, the last thing I'll share here is that I was very clear in this recovery process about, I'm going to talk more about this in this coming year, but the heartbreak, really the redeeming heartbreak aspect of being a special needs mom. And there's a book actually called Redeeming Heartbreak that's helped me find this language. But really recognizing that to endure what I was asked to endure with this recent surgery was absolutely heartbreaking. It's one of the hardest things as a mom to watch your child be hurt and to not feel like you can do anything about it. And so that's heartbreak. And probably there's even depths of heartbreak that I haven't yet discovered or even gotten connected to. But the term redeeming heartbreak is, to me, a beautiful one because it both fully acknowledges the heartbreak, the absolute heartbreak, but then there's the possibility of redeeming it, of not making it all better. Because I don't think that there's really anything that can make that pain better, but it gives another opportunity at launch point to take the heartbreak and to move on, to go on, step out and continue living after having experienced that and having that as part of our lives. And so that is kind of the work that I have been undergoing in this recovery process. And especially the redeeming heartbreak aspect of it, it's something that it's still very much stewing, but it's something that I feel deeply called to bring to this community. As we as moms, it's so natural to like shut down our hearts when we've gone through what we've gone through to watch these children have to experience what they do, or even watch the siblings of these children have to experience what they have to experience as being part of a family of special needs children. And so I think there's a lot of beauty to be found. I think there's a lot of peace to be found in redeeming that heartache. With that said, that's going to wrap up this episode and the final series of this kind of real, raw, and hopefully relatable behind the scenes story. And I hope you found yourself in parts of the story. And I hope even more that you have seen little ways, little specks or slivers of ways that you feel inspired to take on caring for yourself, to take on creating a team, to take on the next step at being the mom that you want to be, not just for your child, but for you, for being the woman that you want to be in this life. Thank you for being on this journey with me. I look forward to many more episodes and to exploring all of this more deeply with you. If you haven't already, would you consider sharing this podcast with a special needs mom that is near and dear to you? And also, I want to make sure I ask if you take a moment to go rate and review this podcast. It just really helps other special needs moms find the show and find the episodes so that they too can be part of our community and can be welcomed in with warm arms. We will see you next week. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.